One thing that I'm kind of shocked that nobody talks about is the transition between being a flight instructor and getting hired first to 121 or Part 135 airline. This process is interesting because the whole dynamic of what you're used to in the Part 91 world kind of changes. The first thing that I want to touch on is that in the Part 91 world, in the world of flight schools and flight training and CFIing and doing check rides with DPEs, there really isn't much consistency in the training environment. There's a lot of technique, there's a lot of do this, don't do that. There is a standard that the FAA uses to test you on, but even then there's still a lot of room on what the DPEs can and cannot test you on. And it really can sometimes feel like they're trying to find things to fail you on, especially in like Part 141 flight schools, because they have a rating to maintain. So they try to make sure that their base checks are harder than the check ride, which makes sense. But it gives you this feeling that everybody is trying to make sure that you fail. You know, they're always trying to find the one piece of information that you don't know and use that to kind of let you dig a hole to fail your check ride. That whole dynamic changes quite drastically once you get to the airline world. Now, of course, there are certain companies that may still be like this who maybe don't care for their pilots as much as others do. But for the most part, companies have a financial incentive to make sure that you do well. Now, this doesn't mean that you can just be a terrible pilot and not study and have very poor flying skills and get through the program. But what it means instead is that everyone is there to make sure that you succeed. The whole goal here is to make sure that you come to this company, you feel welcomed, and that you succeed in the training environment. When you go to the regionals, I think the estimate is that it costs somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 to put a pilot all the way through training. So when you get towards the end of your training cycle, it is very important that they get you through. Otherwise, they just wasted thousands, tens of thousands of dollars trying to get you to complete training and you didn't. So the whole point is that the training environment becomes a lot more structured, a lot more professional. Typically, the check rides follow a very scripted and planned agenda. You know, what you're gonna get, how you're gonna get it. There might be a couple of question marks. For example, you'll get an emergency at some point on your check ride. The specific emergency you might get might be one of three things, you know, and the only thing you don't know is which one of those three you're gonna get. Airlines understand that a Part 135 or 121 check ride is a lot more severe than a Part 91 check ride. You may get to the airlines and have a Part 91 failure on your record as far as a check ride goes. That is not too big of a deal. One check ride, from my understanding, isn't a deal breaker. I myself have one check ride in the Part 91 world. However, what can be a big deal is failures on the Part 135 or Part 121 check rides. This can cause an issue because it makes the airline think that there was some kind of issue between your professionalism, your knowledge, or your ability to fly an aircraft. When you get a Part 121 failure, it is a lot more detrimental to your career. That doesn't mean that you won't get the job you want. It's just things become slightly more complicated. And because of that, airlines understand and the examiners understand that there needs to be a little bit more discretion when it comes to giving you a check ride failure. Okay, so how does this whole process work? So you get your hours, you apply to the regional of your choice or the 121 or Part 135 carrier of your choice, do the interview. We have a whole different video on interviews, and they say, cool, welcome to our company. We'll see you in 2 weeks. You're on the docket and you're ready to get rolling with this stuff. So what happens now? Assuming that you don't have your ATP license, which you probably don't, this is your first 121 and 135 carrier, you are going to have to go to a course called ATP-CTP. What does ATP-CTP stand for? Well, that stands for Airline Transport Pilot Certification Program. This is basically the program that's going to show you all the big mistakes that pilots have made over the last 20, 30, 40 years, some big red ticket items to look out for when you're operating a jet aircraft, some aerodynamic nuances that you'll find when operating jet aircraft, high altitude, operational knowledge that you need to know. It might give a quick overview on the very generic systems of a jet aircraft, and then you will be put into a simulator. Odds are you'll either be in a regional jet simulator, a 737 simulator, an A320 simulator, and you'll run through a variety of maneuvers. Now, these maneuvers aren't like you need to know the airplane type thing. These maneuvers are more like, oh, you're gonna do a stall, you're gonna recover from a stall, you're gonna get some kind of high altitude issue and you're gonna recover from it. It's something that requires you to know the aircraft intimately. You just have to have the ability to recover from whatever situation that you're in. Okay, so now let's move forward a bit. So you finish your ATP-CTP course, you have your ATP written complete. Now it's time to get into the meat and potato. Depending upon your situation, your regional airline might throw in your ATP check ride into your type rating. And we will get into that later, but just kind of remember that for right now. You finish ATP-CTP class. After that, you're gonna go to something called indoctrination. For short, we call it Indoc. What this is think of it as the onboarding experience for any other company you've worked for. At the airlines, it's usually slightly more in depth, and this takes anywhere between 1 to 2 weeks. Basically, it's the airline showing you how their programs work, how the scheduling works. They might give you a little bit of contract information. You'll probably talk to the union for a little bit. Sometimes there's some kind of welcome dinner. It's just welcoming you to the airline and giving you an idea of how the company itself works. This isn't how to fly the plane 101. This isn't ground school. This isn't sim training. This is just welcome to the company. This is how the company works. This is how you jump seat. This is your employee ID number. Before you get to indoc training, sometimes, depending upon your airline, they will send you something called a class drop. Okay, well, what's a class drop? A class drop says, hey, out of the 30 people who are going to be inside of your class, 15 of you guys will be based on a CRJ and you will be based in Salt Lake City, Utah, for example. So it says, hey, these are the aircraft and the positions that are available when you come to our airline. Usually the assignments are picked in a specific order. So sometimes it'll go from senior to most junior. And typically when you get hired at the airlines, the most senior person in your class will be the oldest. The most junior person in your class will be the youngest. So the oldest person chooses first, the youngest person chooses last. You get whatever's left. So if the last thing that anybody wanted was the CRJ in Salt Lake City, well then that's going to be your base. That's going to be your airplane. The other way that some airlines do it is they base it upon your social security number. They go off the last 4. So I think it's like the closer you are to 9999 on your last 4, the sooner you pick. Side tip, depending upon market conditions, you may or may not be able to be picky with who you work for. However, if you can choose a company that is based or has bases where you live or want to live, that is probably the better choice. Otherwise, you might end up commuting. If you can't get hired by the company that has bases that you live at or want to live at, you always have the option to commute, or you could simply just move to wherever you're going to be based at. So now we're done. We finished indoc. You know where you're based. You know some of the basic company operating philosophies, probably how to look at the company op specs and procedures, and now you are being sent home for a little break. Sometimes you get a week, sometimes you get a weekend, sometimes you get 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Really depends upon the company, but you will usually get some kind of break. And during this break, you get to go home, and when you are sent home, you'll usually have a whole stack of training materials, whether this be your iPad, and your iPad will have all the training information that you need inside of it, or perhaps they send you with a bunch of old school books and you got to just go through the books and highlight and do this, that, and the third and figure out what you need to study. Either way, you will more than likely be sent home with training materials. Now, this is what is absolutely critical. You need to study. You 110% need to study. And by this point, hopefully you understand the way that you learn best. So really hone into that. For me, sitting down and reading a book all day does not work for me. I am a much better crammer. I like to wait until the last minute and then just download all the information. And that is usually what works best for me. That's been my philosophy the entire time. Some people hate that. They say, well, you can't really learn that way. Everybody learns differently. So it's important that at this point, you understand your best studying style and follow that. That being said, here are some tips that I use personally when preparing for my type rating. The first one is, and slightly controversial, I use Flight Simulator. But you pick your favorite flight sim, X-Plane, Microsoft Flight Simulator X, 2020, 2024, whatever it may be, it does not matter. Just get a flight simulator and purchase, if there is one available, a pay where steady level aircraft. If you are on any of the big four, so like the CRJ, the ERJ, the Airbus, or the 737, there's more than likely a pay where steady level aircraft for you. And even if it isn't quite steady level, but it's still high enough quality, purchase it and use that to steady. Because what this does is it will allow you to connect the dots. So for example, I use it a lot for studying flows. At the airline, you're gonna have something called triggers and flows. The trigger says, hey, when this happens, you need to hit these switches, or you need to do these actions. That's your trigger, and your flow is doing whatever it says to do. And it's important that you have these triggers and flows memorized to the T. The airlines will provide you with like a paper poster that you can hang up on your wall to kind of like mentally run through and hit the buttons on the poster. But for me, it's very boring. It's not engaging. It doesn't really work. So I use Microsoft Flight Simulator to run through those triggers and flows. When you do it this way, if you forget to do something in your flow, it'll normally lead to some kind of warning or issue on the aircraft, which then gives you that learning moment. Like, oh, if I forget this, then this happens. You also have to learn emergency procedures, okay? And you have to learn emergency memory items. These memory items can be really good to do inside of the simulator, because you can tell the simulator like, hey, give me a hydraulic failure. And then you run through your memory item for an hydraulic system failure, right? And then you can see like, okay, when I do this, this happens. When the system fails, this happens, and there's no pressure. You can just see. Now, obviously, you will not be perfect. You might get the flows a little bit wrong. You might mess up the memory item a little bit. Your procedure might not be spot on, but you will be leaps and bounds ahead of most of the people inside of your training class if you use this method. I use this method all the time. I was on medical leave for about a year and a month at my current employer, and when I went back, before I went back into training, I got on the simulator and I started running through engine failures, emergency items, just working the box, triggers and flows, and it made my training experience way easier. The other thing, like I said, is studying the company material. A lot of times, good established companies will provide you a bunch of training material, but they'll oftentimes give you a list of emphasis items that you need to focus on. Go over those emphasis items and really hone in on those. They'll typically tell you focus on this, focus on this, focus on that, whether it be emergency items, limitations, memory items. You know, if that's what they say to focus on, really hone in on those things, because odds are that's going to be the emphasis item inside of your training program. The other thing you can do too is when you are in indoctrination, you can find guys typically who are maybe like a step or two ahead of you. Maybe they're already doing their type rating, and you can socialize, network, and talk with them to see, hey, like what's going on? What are some things that were some gotchas? What are some things I can look out for? The biggest thing to remember from this though is the more you have memorized and the more you have studied, the more professional you will look and the more prepared you will be. And your instructors will notice this right off the bat. You will even see this inside of your own class. When you are sitting in class, you will be able to take a look and see the guys who went home and they studied and the guys who kind of just messed around. And even on the professional level, it happens. And some guys take it a little bit more serious than others. That's just the way they want to do it. That's all right. But be the guy who's prepared. Be the guy who the instructor says, yeah, this dude like really studied, you know, because that also, all the instructors know each other. So then they'll say like, hey, like this guy, Zach, he's a good kid, real cool dude, was on top of his knowledge, real sharp, smart guy. And then maybe the dude giving you a check ride remembers hearing about, oh yeah, Zach, like I heard he was really sharp. And then let's say during some point in your check ride, you have an issue. This guy's like, oh, this is interesting. Like usually Zach is pretty sharp and everything else he's really good on. This one thing he kind of struggled with a little bit, so like, I'll just kind of help him out, guide him through what I'm trying to get to, you know? Compared to if you were the guy, we'll say Matt, and they say, dude, Matt was terrible. He didn't study, didn't listen to class, always on his phone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then Matt has a hard time during his check ride. All the other instructors are gonna know about Matt. And so then they might not give him as much grace if he's messing up his check ride, which could be a very big issue. So come prepared, be professional, look sharp, look good. Okay, so your break is over, you studied, and we're back in the schoolhouse. We're gonna do, at this point, you're gonna do about a week or two of ground school, and this is gonna be going into in-depth systems, learning about the aircraft, and this will be different for every aircraft. Generally speaking, a jet is a jet, you know, the general way that the systems work will be the same across one jet to the other, but you'll really just be learning the intricacies of how your specific jet operates and the logic that your jet uses to make decisions, or some of the things that might be done for you via automatic systems inside of the airplane. Also, when you come back to training, if you didn't get assigned a partner in indoc, you will probably find out who your partner is when you get the training, and you and this partner more than likely will go through your training together. I know some companies like to pair a captain who is upgrading with a new hire FO, or sometimes you'll just be sent together with somebody who's inside of your class. It really just depends. When I was at JSX, we got paired with a person who was inside of our class. It was 2 FOs. One guy pretends to be captain, one guy pretends to be first officer. My current employer, they try really hard to give us a captain during our upgrade training. So for example, when I decided to become captain, odds are I will be paired with a new hire FO. And I prefer that method a little bit more, because then you're not role switching, you get to focus on your FO duties. The captain gets to focus on their captain duties, but then also it kind of gives you a mentor, when you know a captain inside of the company who hopefully is cool and then kind of guide you through, like, hey man, this is things you should know about. This is how the line really is when you're flying the line, like the actual operations is what we actually do. So once you do your week 2 of ground school, you're going to get into simulator training, okay? Simulator training is not fun. It is not fun. The first day is kind of fun because you're finally in the simulator and you're excited and you're pumped to be sitting in the seat of the airplane that you're going to be in, and everything feels so fresh and so new. But then usually by the second or third day, that feeling kind of wears out, because it's very much a no thrills environment. Sometimes if your instructor is cool, they might throw in some things to make it a little bit more fun, but sometimes your company may be very strict and the fun stuff they don't really like to do. In your simulator training though, it's really about emergencies. You're not spending much time learning how the operation works, so to speak. So you're not just like, okay, we're pushing back from the gate, we're taxiing to the runway, we're taking off, we're cruising, we're landing, we're taxiing to the gate. They assume that you could probably figure that out. And that's not what the sim training is for. The sim training is really for figuring out what V1 cuts are and learning how to handle a V1 cut. Learning how to handle a engine failure, hydraulic system failure, landing gear not coming down, loss of directional control, stalls, unusual attitudes. A lot of times they'll have company emphasis items, so things that pilots have been messing up at your specific carrier. They'll usually throw that into your training cycle too, to say, hey, like a lot of guys have been messing up X, Y, and Z. So we want you to focus on X, Y, and Z and make sure that these guys come to the line don't have that issue anymore. You spend like a week or two, maybe probably closer to 2 weeks, just knocking out emergency after emergency after emergency after emergency. You get a little worn out, you get a little tired of doing emergencies. Nonetheless, still a very cool experience. At the end of your simulator training, you will take a check ride. The check ride depends upon your company. So at my current employer, they have your last check ride is kind of like a line observation where you pretend to do a flight from one city to another and everything is normal, and then during that flight at some point you'll get some sort of emergency, and the goal is to see how you and your fellow captain or how you and your fellow FO work through that emergency. At another company that I've been at, JSX, the check ride was just a bunch of emergencies and failures, working through all the problems. The check rides usually take about 2 hours each. So inside of the sim, you'll also have like verbal check ride of some sort, more than likely. But when you guys have the sim, your partner is going to do their version of the check ride. So basically they'll be the ones flying, you'll be the one assisting. Once they pass, it'll swap, and then you'll be the one flying and they'll be the one assisting. Each one of those takes about 2 hours, and then you can account for maybe another 2 hours for the ground knowledge if you have to do a knowledge portion of the check ride. So you can expect this to take about 6 hours. At some companies, they do the verbal portion of the check ride on a different day separate, so that way on your check ride day it's only 4 hours. Some companies you don't even do a verbal check ride, much rather instead you have a written test that you do, and that counts for your verbal check ride. So this depends, every company does things a little bit different, but the overall premise is usually about the same. Okay, so once you finish a check ride and you pass, you are then legally able to operate this aircraft on a legal level, okay? It doesn't mean you're able to operate the aircraft at this company. It just says that, hey, like, the government will now acknowledge the fact that you are certified to fly a CRJ at 900 or a Boeing 737. From there, you then have to go on to do your IOE training. Well, what is IOE training? Initial operating experience. During your IOE, you will fly with a training captain or a check airman. At my company, we call them check pilots, I believe. And these are guys or gals who are trained by the company to fly with new hire FOs or to fly with upgrading captains. In your case, you'll be the new hire FO, and they're gonna get you up to speed on the crash course of what paperwork you need to be good at, what things you need to look at, and getting you comfortable flying the aircraft. Typically on IOE, the first flight will be done by your IOE captain. They'll show you the first landing, the first takeoff, the things to do in cruise, things you should be looking at on your iPad, etc., etc. And then after they do that first flight, more than likely you'll be doing the rest of the flights during your IOE training. And this is to make sure that you have all the time possible to get your landings down, get your takeoffs down, to get a good feel for how the aircraft operates. And typically IOE will last for anywhere between 20 to 30 hours. It could go longer depending upon how you are doing during this training. And again, they're not looking to fail you. They're just trying to make sure that you have the knowledge and skills that you need to fly this aircraft safely. And understand that during your IOE training, you are flying passengers. This isn't like they're getting some empty jet and you're practicing in this empty jet. You will be flying with passengers this entire time. So your first landing will be with passengers on board. So it can be interesting. So just make sure you're ready for all that mentally. Once you finish your IOE, then you're done. You're ready to be a line pilot for whatever 121 or Part 135 carrier that you are working for. So when you get that far, congratulations from me to you. Now, I know this sounds like a long process, but this will be the general footprint of what to expect in the professional training world. Once you go from a regional to a major, some things will be slightly different. For example, you won't be taking ATP-CTP course because that's done for. You won't be doing ATP written because that's done for. So then really it'll just be indoc, ground school, type rating, IOE.